Hello, everybody. I am very excited today to be joined by Connor Brooks and Alex Rhodes from Sinch MessageMedia, and we're going to be talking about business communication, how that whole space is evolving. Guys, how are the pair of you?
Doing well today, thanks.
Great, thanks.
Amazing. So, quick question just before we dive in. Tell us a bit more about what you do as a company, and how did you land up in this space? What attracted you to this space?
Sure. I am our senior partner marketing manager, and I come from a background in product marketing and had worked in a tech company prior to this. And I just thought the communication piece of it was interesting. And I like receiving texts from people when I want to receive them. So I see a lot of opportunity in that space.
Awesome. And just out of curiosity, over the last few years, especially in B2B, the whole world has kind of shifted in terms of where the office is, how to contact companies. What have you seen, and what's been kind of your take or your response to that change, let's say since 2020?
Sure. What I see, like personally, I work from home most days. We have an office and I go in about once a week. And I find that to be great as community building within the organization, right? But if I need to produce, I'm going to be at home. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And Connor, I know what we've seen in the business is a lot of field employees and things like that, where you're getting those messages from the home office to field employees.
Yeah, I think, there's two ways to talk about this. One, kind of on a personal note, right? When we used to be in the office, I could walk over to your desk, David, and I could just ask you a question, or you and I could chat about things. Now that that's not the case, now that I'm remote, I'm here in Austin, Texas. Alex is in Denver. He and I, if we're going to speak, we're going to be on a video call. And so now maybe I need to call the doctor's office. Maybe I need to, call the mechanic and see when my truck's going to be done being repaired. Maybe Alex's kids are ready to be picked up from school a little bit early. So now all of those things that might have been a phone call just to make it quick and efficient are going to be sent via text. And so I think we've kind of seen this change from where texting used to just be a very personal thing. If you're my buddy or you're a family member, I would text you and check in on you. But now it's just a way to get notifications and informations into your customers' hands quicker. And I love it. And that's kind of what brought me to this space. I have a background in direct sales and I've done a couple different tech startup sales jobs. And I just thought it was super interesting that, something that as a millennial, I use all the time through and through. I'm sure I send thousands and thousands of texts a month. But I think just from a business perspective, it makes so much sense. It's so quick. Your customers are going to read that quicker. They're going to reply quicker, especially if the texting that you use for your business communications allows for that two-way communication. That's huge these days.
Are there any verticals that you see texting be much more effective, or that are embracing it more than others?
I think e-commerce is huge. When we talk about letting someone know about their order status, maybe the tracking information for shipping, even capturing additional revenue by the way of abandoned cart reminders. Hey, David, we noticed that you were eyeing something on our store. Come back and use this code for 15% off. A lot of those sales that did not convert will, after people get that notification, and it's typically pretty quick too. You can test this out for yourself. If you guys online shop at all, go to one of your favorite websites, put something in the cart, leave the tab open for a little bit, mill it over, close it, but make sure you kind of gone through the checkout process halfway, put in your shipping info, and then wait for that text. And it's going to come. Most businesses nowadays, you're going to get that text. So e-commerce is pretty big. Anything that involves technicians being deployed for deliveries, repairs, things like that. And then kind of even outside of that space, if you're not selling something, if you're not shipping something, if you don't have technicians, feedback surveys. How many times have you ever clicked on an email and opened up a feedback survey and filled it out? Probably a very, very low percentage. But now with that text, It's so simple to click that link, put in a 5 stars, add any additional notes if you really want to, click submit, and then you're good.
We worked with a lot of companies selling into the real estate space, and I was wondering, just like for example, brokers, right? They spend their entire day on the road, and their office is in their hands. Have you seen a lot of applications there at all?
Definitely between commercial and residential, whether it's loan approval, things like that. It's just also simple, especially when you talk about integrating into some of these bigger business systems that these companies use, the different CRMs and ERPs. It's no longer just, maybe I'm a broker at a firm. I'm no longer just using my personal device and sending a text one off. It's now tracked as kind of like one source of truth, right? Inside of our CRM, whatever we manage our clientele in. So it's definitely important. I mean, it seems like a lot of businesses are doing this nowadays, but if they're not, then they're way behind the curve.
Yeah, I think it kind of comes back to customer experience, right? I'll put the marketing lens on this and all the marketing speak. When it's customer experience, I want to feel trusted. So you got two things: customer experience and trust. And if you're able to provide a good customer experience, which also means you're providing trust to your customers. Hey, I saw you were looking at this shirt. Maybe you got distracted. Maybe you're trying to sell me that, but also I know that you're paying attention to me as a customer. With real estate, as an example, as someone who recently bought a house, I need to know if that deal's closing, if the paperwork got there, and I want to know right now, because that's a big, major purchase. I want to be able to trust you with that. So if I can have that one-to-one conversation. And we had an electrician come to our house recently, and we got the text that, hey, this electrician's on the way. It sent me a photo of the electrician, told me a little bit about his background. This is a person coming into my house. I need to be able to trust him. All of a sudden, I know all these things about him, and that made my customer experience just light years better because I could trust the person and the company.
So it's a really interesting kind of concept, this whole kind of blending the online communication with, obviously, like, for example, in the case of an electrician, with a real personal encounter. So using the online side to build enough trust for that. Do you see brands having to change the way that they communicate as a result of them adopting SMS as a regular medium for communication? So just as an example, I'm sure many of you get these kind of 3-paragraph long LinkedIn emails that might make sense if you're writing an email, but it's LinkedIn, doesn't make sense in that context. So when you take on clients, do you kind of advise them on that, or do they get it? How informal do they go? Like, what's some best tips that you can kind of share out there for anyone who's running SMS campaigns and looking to engage with an audience in a meaningful way?
I think a couple key factors here too. When you're talking about how you communicate with your customers, the type of message that you want to send, text is reserved primarily for quick notifications, kind of short form communication. And I think when we look at, what types of customers would prefer to receive text, that might be a little bit different too, depending on the age bracket that your customers fall into. We've seen some data from our customers that some of the more advanced in their career clientele, as we'll call them, they prefer to be emailed still. So it depends on not only what you're sending, but kind of what clientele you're targeting. I think additionally, businesses have to consider that there is certain types of language that are not allowed to be sent via text. And so that's one thing that you have to take in mind as you're crafting this messaging. What industry are you in? And so I think it's not just as simple as, we're just going to start texting our customers. There's a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah, I think we've seen some customers and heard some customers like, oh, this is great. I'll just do this instead of email. That's not it. To use real estate as an example, if you're sending over a bunch of contracts and forms, do not text that to me. It probably is not going to go through. And if it does, I'm not going to be happy about it. But feel free to send me a text to say, hey, I emailed over these documents. Just want to be sure you see those because here's the deadline.
Yeah.
Quick, fast.
So do you see a lot of companies building it into like a multi-channel approach for customer or prospective customer communication, where different platforms are being used for sharing different types of information? Okay. And text is most commonly being used for reminders, quick question here or there, but not necessarily the heavy lifting type of back and forth conversations. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say for companies that basically just want to get those quick notifications and reminders out, text is a really easy go-to. I think the second deeper level of using texting is where you implement the conversational piece. How many times do you go to a website and the chat bot pops up and it's AI powered, right? It's automated. You're going to answer quick questions and it might try to direct you to a self-help article. I think when you get a little bit deeper with the texting is, when that doctor's office texts you and says, hey, just a reminder, your appointment's tomorrow at noon. Prior to your arrival, please provide your insurance information and complete these customer intake forms. And then you could text back and say, where do I find the link for the forms? And then someone can text you back. And it's kind of more personal, right? It makes you feel a little bit better about this process. You're giving customer information, most likely sensitive information on these forms. Where's it going? What are they doing with it? But if you can speak to someone and someone's kind of behind that computer screen, right, it makes you feel a little bit better about it. So I think there's two levels to it. There's just using texting, having it be sent automatically through maybe some workflows you've created. And then there's kind of the conversational piece, which I think your customers really enjoy. And I think it's the same way via email, right? If I'm emailing somebody or chatting with somebody online for support, it feels nice to speak to a real person.
With the growth of AI and GPT, do you see, firstly, is it legal to use it for texting, for back and forth? I don't know, I'm just asking. And secondly, if so, is that kind of the next wave in terms of customer communication?
It is legal, so there's that. We've tested it. I think the question you're going to come back to is exactly what Connor was saying, right? Like, what's the level of interaction and engagement you want with those customers? Because right now, ChatGPT is really great at a lot of things. Do I want that to have conversations with my client before I can? Probably not. I would rather have that conversation or have Connor have that real person conversation. Now, when you talk about chat bots and things like that, I think a lot of people expect that now, that I'm going to talk to this machine and it's going to direct me to a real person. That's, I think, currently the best use case. If I knew where ChatGPT were going, I'd probably have a lot more money. I think eventually you'll get to a point where the AI, the ChatGPTs of the world are that good. Right now, I don't think it's there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could upload like a lot of data you could build, for example, let's say for tracking orders or those kind of level conversations, right? Where it's like, let me know about my trip itinerary, or where's my order, or those kinds of things, where as long as it's got access to the data, you don't necessarily need a person involved. I think in the world of B2B, communication is a bit different, but more intricate. I'm curious if you see are there personas, or have you noticed personas that are more responsive, let's say, to an SMS? I know we spoke, Connor, about the demographics in terms of age potentially is one of the factors, but are there others that you can break it down and say, you know what, more analytical people or more technical buyers, they prefer to read long form emails. They don't like to be text. More commercial, busy CEO level people, they prefer short form. I don't know. Have you seen any sort of correlation just out of the customers that you're using and where they're seeing the most engagement?
I mean, across the board, to be honest with you, we have seen that in terms of getting information in your customer's hands quickly and maybe expecting a quick response, text overall just seems to be more effective. Even the people that are busier, right? They're kind of running around. You have a lot on your plate, David. And so getting you a text and getting you to reply might be the easiest way. But then conversely, like Alex mentioned, if I'm sending over a contract for a loan and you're going to close on a home here, I'm probably not going to send that via text. I might send you a text to just let you know that I did email you these sensitive documents. And so I think it depends on what the message is. I don't necessarily know that we've seen any correlation between, different personality types and if they prefer email versus text. I do think it comes down to the type of conversation that you're going to be having. If it is a more long form, detail oriented conversation, I think email is much more appropriate. If it is something just want to say, hey, please confirm your appointment tomorrow, reply 1 to confirm. That's so simple and easy to be sent, via text. So I think it's about the type of conversation.
Yeah, and I'll just tack on to that. It's a question for the business. What kind of relationships do you have with your customers? We get a lot of people who say, oh, well, I'm B2B, so text won't work for me. That's not true. What kind of relationships do you have with the people, do your sales teams have with the people that they're communicating with? Because if you have the ability to text a person you're selling to or a partner that you're working with, that's a level of engagement that not a lot of other people have. So if you can create that level of engagement, that's great. Now, would you send an outbound marketing SMS campaign to a bunch of CFOs and CEOs? I'm going to recommend against that. But if Connor, for instance, has a relationship with someone at that level, he should be able to text them and have that one-to-one engagement if that's what they prefer.
What kind of analytics do you get on the back end of running SMS campaigns? Do can you kind of clue everybody in who hasn't run it or thinks to themselves, well, I want to send this out there, but what happens next? So I'd love to kind of hear just from your experience and maybe from what you guys do as to what kind of insights and how valuable that could be for like a marketer, as an example.
Sure. As the marketer, I'll jump into that one. And Connor can probably fill in with some of the details, but you're going to see opens. You're going to see the links. You can track the links that get clicked. If you're doing like an inbound marketing campaign with a short code, and we've all seen this, like text beach to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're instantly going to know how many people are engaged with that ad that they saw. Mm-hmm. And now that you have that number, now you can start exactly what Connor was talking about. Here's our engagement. Here's our one-to-one conversation. So that's a really quick way of tracking it. And you can use UTM codes, et cetera, in the links so that you're able to really track through all the way. What did I miss there, Connor?
No, I think you're right. Obviously, you can see delivery rates. So, sometimes carriers will put in place carrier blocks if you're violating some of the language rules for SMS communication. So you can see if your language is impacting your delivery rates. But I think Alex pretty much nailed it. The human psychology of language is pretty interesting, right? If you word calls to action differently, whether it's an email or chat or text, it can sometimes persuade people to act on those calls of action at different rates. So I think that's one of the cool things about kind of the open rates and the link clicks is that depending on how you phrase these CTAs, you might have higher response rates from your customers. So it's an ever-changing process, right? I'm sure, especially as a marketer, for me in sales, it's generally I can kind of gauge the customer's interest. And so I'm just trying to get them information and help them solve a pain point. But with marketing, they're trying to convince you or change your mind about something. And so I think it really comes into play there, especially how you word those texts.
Well, that's where, as a marketer, you can start to geek out around, okay, we have this email campaign that's going out. Let's layer on some SMS to that and see, is there an increase in both? Does one make the other inverse? And we're talking a lot about texting and SMS here. I think it's important to mention globally, if you're in South America, we're going to do a WhatsApp campaign. If you're in Japan, it's going to be Line. It's this omni-channel being where your customers are. In the US, it's definitely text. Like that's how you're going to instantly reach someone. You can still use WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and all of those things as well, but predominantly knowing in each region your persona, as you talked about a minute ago, David. Who am I texting? Who am I messaging? What platform are they on and why?
I think that's a critical point. And I see it a lot also with our customers, who come to us for sales development work. And, they're asking me, all right, we want to book X many meetings through cold calls. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. What about these other channels that we can use? And I think people like to think very linearly when it comes to marketing. Like, we're doing X, we move in a straight line, we get this result, we repeat it or whatever. And that's actually not how it works. I mean, I kind of feel like I've been relearning this whole thing even this year, seeing internally where our leads are coming from. They're coming from all sorts of different efforts that we do, that we can build some cohesion around and different playbooks around, but it's not like one specific channel is going to be it. And I think that that's a critical point, is, just kind of linking together what both of you have been saying. It's where you use it in the marketing mix is what makes it effective. And understanding how to layer, where do we need short form, instant communication, instant replies, and the ability to understand, who's engaging with us, and where do we need to maybe build more trust or build a deeper relationship, and how do we layer that all together? And for me, an obvious use case for text or WhatsApp or however we want to frame it would be like during an event, during a large conference event. When you go to those, email is pretty ineffective actually, and the conference apps are usually pretty useless, or just hard to navigate. Everyone has their mobile phones out, thousands of people trying to connect. If you know who's attending, you've got their numbers, you hit them over to your booth with a special offer or whatever, right? I could see that being extremely effective. So as a marketer, I think you've got to use your weapons wisely, as you see fit. I've got a question for you, just as a kind of side point. The whole way we all work has changed. Alex, you mentioned you spend a lot of time working from home. I do too. Our company's remote. And that also leads to all sorts of questions about work-life balance, appropriate times to have business communications. Personally, I found I get reached out to at all different times during the day. And if it's a potential customer, I'm responding, or on the weekend or what have you. But is there anything that you advise? Do you advise customers to stick to the traditional 9 to 5 in terms of hours of when to send out messaging? Or have you seen there are just different times and different days where people are more responsive? What have you, just from the client experience, what would you advise, and what have you seen be effective?
I mean, obviously no one wants to be woken up at 2 a.m. and I'm really sorry if you have been, David, by text.
Not by you, so it's okay.
Now, if I buy something online, I kind of expect I'm taking an action. There's an expectation there from the customer. I've taken an action. You're going to communicate with me immediately after that action. Totally fine. If I'm sending you a marketing message text, it better be in that 9 to 5 range. And that's where you need to really have a good handle on where your customers are. For instance, we integrate into multiple CRMs, and we give the ability in those integrations to say, set your time limit here. And some of them, it'll give you a warning like, hey, this will be 6 a.m. for this person. You sure you want to send this? So you can make those changes. And there are regulations as well, and they're posted all over the Sinch site, regulations around when you're allowed to text people, call people, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a loaded question, right? Because as someone who does work remotely, and being that our company is a little bit segmented in terms of being in Sweden and then Australia and then Denver and Texas. And so we're kind of all over, right? When you're playing with different time zones, I think it would be unrealistic for me to expect, those that I'm working with and maybe that I'm trying to help implement SMS, that I'm only going to get communications from 9 to 5. So I totally get it on one hand, and I'm very easy to get a hold of. And so I think everybody just has to, maybe have a little bit of grace when it comes to, hey, I received this text. Well, what time is it? Where is it coming from? Definitely, I wouldn't recommend having it a part of your business practice to, send all of your marketing texts at 11 p.m. if my phone buzzes and it's an ad for a bed for my golden retriever, I'm going to be pretty upset. And I'm probably just going to unsubscribe immediately and then not think about your product in the future. So I think it's kind of like what you just mentioned. You have to use your weapons wisely. I think there are times to send an email instead, and times to send a text message. It seems like the more urgent or pertinent the information, the more appropriate that an SMS would be. Otherwise, if you're generally just trying to let me know of product updates or kind of a newsletter release, go ahead and send that email that goes out at 2 a.m. I'm not going to see it until I wake up, but that's perfectly fine. Maybe I'll start my day scrolling through my email and I'll see that information then. So if it's not like hey, just wanted to get this in front of you right away, and you might need to respond to this, then SMS is not always your best option.
Yeah, it's super true. And again, with the office now being in our pocket, and many of our customers and potential customers being the same way, I think that is definitely something that needs consideration and that more brands need to be aware of, because it's interesting how you can leave a bad impression just by the time that you send the email or the SMS, not even by what you said, which is just like an interesting scenario. How many people have unsubscribed just because they didn't like the time that piece of information was sent to them, or the channel that it was sent on. Okay, what other tips would you suggest that our audience think about when they're building an SMS or a marketing campaign that includes SMS? Are there other, do you ever strategize with them on how to layer that in to their go-to-market campaign? I guess, Alex, I'll pick on you, seeing as you're the marketer here. What's some best practice there?
Absolutely. One best practice is, your typical call to action. But also remember, this is not an email. This is a person. You're hitting my phone. This is my personal life. So when you have that conversation with me, come to me as a real person, not as a business, not as a, hey, I saw you saw that, know my name. Anything you can do to add images, it's known as MMS in the business. That's just going to give you more engagement. Everyone, we're a visual species for the most part. A photo of whatever you're talking about instantly lets me know. Like, for instance, the electrician, I have a photo of him. I know who he is when he comes to my door. I know immediately what this is in reference to just by seeing the photo. That piece, and then trying to start that conversation. It's a personal mode of communication. If you're just sending out newsletters as texts, that's not the best use. Any updates are great. Quick updates, just like Connor said, quick, fast. If you're texting me at 3 a.m. and you need something quick and fast, terrible idea. So save that for email. Did I miss anything there, Connor?
I think you nailed it. Certainly it's part of the process that we walk all of our customers through, but don't text your customers without express consent. There is a process for opt-in. So don't just think that because they've signed up for your email newsletter that they're automatically going to want text messages sent at all hours of the day. You need to ask them. You need to make sure it's okay. So make that part of your process. Things like that. I mean, it's not just like the Wild West, as they would say. There's some regulations and rules around it, and there's definitely a strategy. I think you mentioned, and I'm going to go back to it again, when you said using your tools wisely, kind of in the marketing process, right? If I'm looking at the bed for my golden retriever, he's a large dog. Maybe at one point I was looking at these dog beds, and if I have, kind of decided that maybe I don't need that right now. If I have not been interacting and clicking the links that you're sending me, then I don't think it's appropriate for you to be sending me text every couple of days. Now, on the other hand, if I am in your newsletter and I'm clicking these links, and maybe I have gone through the checkout process halfway one time and I've put my shipping and my phone number in, maybe that text is going to be that push that I need to convert to be a buyer. But on the flip side, like I mentioned, if I'm not interacting, if I'm not really showing any active interest and I get that text, I'm likely just going to unsubscribe because it's not something that is kind of in my focus right now. So it really is it's a formula, it's a strategy, and this is why marketers do what they do, and probably why I'm not a marketer, because I'm not an expert at it. I leave that to Alex and my cohorts.
Well, I think you hit on something good there, though, Connor, about, it always comes back to the dog, of course. But we get a lot of questions around from marketers, especially, how do I do this without pissing people off or having them opt out? My response to that is exactly what Connor says. You have to get their permission. Get their permission to text them, just like you would get their permission to email them. Once you have that, you are going to get opt-outs. It will happen because some people will say, I want that level of engagement. I changed my mind. That's okay, because the people that you do have who are still getting your texts and want those texts, that is your top 2%. Those are the engaged people. Those are the people that you're going to show love to. Those are the people you're going to give special discounts, et cetera, to prior to anybody else. And I give this example a lot. I only allow like 3 or 4 brands to text me. And I've had brands where they say, hey, here's something special for our text members. And I'll get a percentage off of whatever product they're selling. And I'll get an email the same day with the exact same offer. You guys are missing the boat. I'm special because I'm allowing you to text me. We have a relationship. If you're giving that to everyone, now I don't feel special. And now I'm totally opting out, because what's the point?
There's, I think that's super, super interesting again, in terms of layering your audience based on the channel that you're reaching out to them on. There's some pretty significant changes coming next year, which I think should play in your favor pretty well. With the Google changes to inboxes, the Microsoft changes to inboxes, that is going to affect a lot of deliverability in a lot of companies, and going to be a huge point of concern for text-based, outreach. I'm curious as to if you're seeing a lot more companies therefore consider SMS or text or WhatsApp as a key part of the communication strategy going forward, just because of the fear of that, 3 out of 1,000 or something like that, marking that email as a bad email or a spam email. Curious as to what you guys are seeing on the front lines of the space.
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing a ramp up, and I think part of it is because, like we've mentioned, implementing SMS and shifting your communication, it's not an overnight process. It's not something that you just say, I'm going to start texting tomorrow. There's going to be a kind of a trial and error period where you look at the language that you're sending, the times that you're sending, kind of where that fits in this customer communication journey, right? So it certainly sparked a lot of interest, and kind of initiated a need for the SMS to be implemented in, businesses' toolboxes for how they speak with their customers. And that is a change that definitely plays in our favor. It's a tough change. I think it's probably warranted a little bit, because there are spam emails. I still get spam emails, but I also still get spam text as well. So I think just kind of stricter regulations all around are not necessarily a bad thing.
If people want to stay in touch, get some tips, get some advice, or even better, hire you guys and set themselves up with some text-based campaigns, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
You could always go to messagemedia.com. All of our website links are available there. There's a contact us form. We'll get back to you super quickly. My personal email is just my first.last name @messagemedia.com. So feel free to shoot me a message. I'd love to chat with you and talk about, what your business does today and how SMS might fit into that picture. And I'll even bring Alex along. He's got some really good comedic value that he brings to all the meetings. So I'll make sure he's there to bring some laughs.
Yeah, and I'm sure our LinkedIn information is linked here as well. So reach out to us on LinkedIn, messagemedia.com. And we're also available in marketplaces. So if you're using a specific CRM, you'll be able to find a Message Media app. Some key ones are HubSpot, Salesforce, NetSuite, and Zoho. We do a lot of integrations with others. So you can find us on those marketplaces. But yeah, messagemedia.com is the best place, or LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Connor, Alex, it's been great chatting with you both and learning a little bit about this world of text-based communication. Everybody, I hope you learned something, and we will speak again soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, David.
Thanks, David.